several emails on this topic, so we want to go through and hear from the folks that decided to come in today and share their stories. But before I do that, I'll give the other two representatives an opportunity to have the opening comments.
State Representative Joel Fry, here to listen, thank you.
Representative West Breckenridge, here to listen also.
Okay, so what we're gonna do here, where's Representative Shipley? Representative Shipley, I'd like you to start, and then what we're gonna do is go around the room and make sure you tell us your name, where you're from, what organization you might be here on behalf of, and then we'll hear this issue. Thank you.
All right, Representative Jeff Shipley, Van Buren County. First off, thank you very much to the members of this committee for hosting this very historic meeting on such a very important and pressing topic. I'll keep my opening remarks very brief because I want to get a lot of robust discussion as we explore this all together and have a conversation that the entire state can take part of. The bill, House File 459, merely just deletes psilocybin and psilocin from Schedule 1. Schedule 1 is for substances that have a high potential for abuse and no medical value. And so as we hear testimony today, I just want to really stress that, is that does this belong in Schedule 1? Do these substances meet the description of high potential for abuse and no medical value? And since there is a lot of emerging science and people experimenting with this across the country, across the world, I do view the burden being on the state, whether that's the Department of Public Safety or lawmakers, to demonstrate that these do in fact belong in Schedule 1. And absent overwhelming, clear, and convincing evidence that psilocybin meets the definition of Schedule 1, I would ask lawmakers to move this bill forward. And then just lastly, did have a chart handout here that just compared a bunch of different controlled substances, and it's just very interesting how there does seem to be some inconsistencies in the drug scheduling, where a drug like psilocybin is Schedule 1, whereas dextrofan, which is very powerful dissociative properties when taken in high doses, is used very frequently in over-the-counter cough syrup and has not been scheduled, to my knowledge, since 1976. So there does seem to be some incongruity in how the state of Iowa and the federal government is addressing these substances. And again, just really looking forward to a really robust discussion and very thankful for everyone taking part in this conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, Andrew Funk, with the Secretary.
Come on, Jeff.
Andrew Funk with the Iowa Board of Pharmacy. We're registered in the side of the board monitoring the bill. I think one important piece that I just want to point out is Schedule 1 includes high potential abuse with no currently accepted medical value. I think the accepted word is important here.
If you would, and also, if everybody can come up when you come to testify, come to the table, speak in the microphone, so everybody online can hear as well.
My name's
Here,
Todd.
and hit the little person on the back there. Okay. There you go.
Hi, my name's Todd Mulford. I'm from Hampton, Iowa.
Do you have any testimony on behalf of Bill?
Yeah, psilocybin works very effectively for treating drug addiction and depression and anxiety, and I personally struggled with meth for literally decades, and tried AA and treatment centers like that, and didn't have any success at all until I learned about psilocybin, and then once I utilized it, I've been clean 5 years now. And I just think that there's without strong plant medicines that naturally occur in nature, effective, beneficial, non-harmful, safe medicine, there's no way that I could or can even sustain my sobriety. I actually need these whole plant medicines to go forward from here to be able to sustain happiness and joy in my heart, so that I don't go back into depression and drugs and destruction in my life. So it's just absolutely necessary, it's natural, God put it here for a reason, and it's well capable of delivering hardcore meth addicts from meth addiction.
Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Susie Scher, I'm here from the Office of Drug Control Policy. We are registered undecided on this bill, we're monitoring. We are closely watching the FDA, or the clinical trials that are currently underway, and like Andrew said, the accepted medical use is kind of the key word, at least to us. Our concern is that it may be premature to remove these substances from the controlled substance schedule at this time. If, those clinical trials conclude that there is medicinal value, there are already processes in place in Iowa to move forward with that. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brent Russell. I'm a native Iowa from Ankeny, a former network administrator at Science Center of Iowa. I have a lot of anxiety from childhood, basically, and I've always dealt with that, grinding my teeth at night. I've had to deal with this a lot. I went to the Netherlands and I used psilocybin. For at least 6 months after that first use, I could just feel this relief off of my shoulder. My wife said the same thing. I've been back a few times to use psilocybin. I can't do this here in Iowa, it's illegal. So I've gone there, and every time I get this huge relief off of my shoulders. I think it is an accepted form of medical treatment. There's Dr. Ross from NYU. He's done some clinical studies, and he's found that it has been helpful for end-of-life cancer patients. There's also a Matthew Johnson at Johns Hopkins University. He's treated people with PTSD from everything from car accidents to sexual abuse to war, and they go through CBT, talking through their problems. These sessions, it takes about 15 sessions to get over, or to start receiving this treatment, or to have actual treatment being helpful. And 8 to 15 different sessions. With psilocybin, it's only 2 to 3 sessions. And these sessions, a lot of people, they don't want to go through them because you can imagine they don't want to talk about this stuff. Not only that, there's the cost and the time that's involved. So there's been trials that are out there that have shown that it is medically effective. And I'm a case myself, I know that it's effective. I would love for this to be something available for me here in Iowa, that way I don't have to leave the country to go and use it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shannon Myers. I'm from Polk County. I'm also a clinician and provider. I'm a professor at Drake University in the counseling program, a research fellow, the Iowa's only certified mental health integrated medicine provider. I'm also Iowa's only psychedelic integration provider, which is legal. I've gone through MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, who's been a nonprofit doing research since 1986 on the use of psychedelics and mental health. I'm also someone who has benefited from psilocybin. I work with folks all across Iowa and the United States with untreated mental and physical health conditions, end-of-life concerns, and I provide safety, resources, and integration services necessary after the use of psilocybin, and I have seen transformative effects of individuals who would not likely benefit from therapy, who would not access therapy, who have gone to therapy, who have had childhood trauma, and it has been untreated, who have bidirectional physical, mental, and spiritual manifestations of their childhood trauma. I am someone who am a mother, I am a business owner, I'm a clinician, and after the birth of my daughter is 5, I had an autoimmune flare that was so severe that I could not walk, talk, speak, eat, perform my essential duties. I was working for the state at the time at Iowa Department for the Blind. I was a business owner, a young mother. I sought care. I went to every doctor. I saw 20 different doctors. They could not care for my autoimmune condition. They found out that I had environmental illness, I had mold illness. So I had to go a non-traditional route in order to live. And so I sought out psilocybin, and after that experience, my thyroid started to heal. Now that's not in any of the studies, but that was the childhood trauma. I suffered from childhood abuse, religious trauma, and I was able to connect with God in a way that I never had before, in a way that was so caring and loving, through like inner child healing. I know that you're a therapist and understand what that is. I am more connected with my clients, with my family. I have purpose and meaning in my life. My trauma no longer exists, runs my life. OCD is managed. All of my physical health conditions are managed. And I am fully stepping into the work, and I'm here on behalf of all of the clients that I have served in Iowa and across the land that are begging for this modality to be accessible. So many people are suffering. It is beneficial. I've seen it beneficial for those with complex trauma, PTSD. Like this gentleman shared for addiction, it's great for smoking, alcohol addiction. I've seen, I don't even drink anymore. I'm totally sober, I just love being alive. And that was just from one interaction. And so I'm here just on behalf to support the 50% of individuals with disabilities that end up in our prison system because they are trying to self-treat. I'm here on behalf to repair the relationship that we have with the land, with the indigenous peoples, with the communities of Black, people of color, indigenous communities, the Sauk, the Iowa, and the Meskwaki people, the land in which we all stand on, the medicines in which my ancestors, my indigenous ancestors, have used for millennia to resolve trauma. I'm here to decriminalize nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Representatives. Chuck Hurley, personal interest. I don't have a long background in the science of this, but having been through some drug abuse of my own 40 years ago, I am going to register undecided because I respect the statements that were made before. Is this accepted? My little bit of research shows that there's great promise, but I'd love to hear how that accepted process works before I would register in support. Johns Hopkins has a great name. I don't know whether that's fully deserved or not, but they have opened a new department. I've read some lengthy research on this in the last few days. Alan Davis, PhD, adjunct assistant professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, said the magnitude of the effect we saw using psilocybin for treating depression was about 4 times larger than what clinical trials have shown for traditional antidepressants. So maybe there's something there. JAMA, Journal of, I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's a medical journal. JAMA Psychiatry just published in last November a study that says psilocybin may be effective in a much wider population of patients who suffer from major depression than has been previously appreciated. And one of the speakers before mentioned that it has been used extensively to help life-threatening cancer diagnoses patients relieve existential anxiety and depression. So it sounds like it's got some real promise. The obviously downside would be is it, would changing this status lead to more abuse of it, like I experienced 40 years ago. So that's my biggest concern. And then just like to close with a quick thought. I There's a couple of key passages that really have intrigued me for years on this subject of drugs and so on. One is Genesis, where it declares that everything God created was good. Then there was the fall, okay, and abuse of some of those things that He created. But in the New Testament, after the fall, there's a repeat where it says, 1 Timothy 4:4 says, "For everything God created is good if it is received with thanksgiving." And so I just think there's got to be a way to use these things that can help people with severe depression without leading to more abuse of it. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Anybody over here on the other side? Just observing. I understand that. This will be one of those you want to come observe. Anybody else want to weigh in before we turn it back over to the legislators? Yeah, come on back. We got a few more minutes.
In Exodus chapter 16, Moses describes a small round thing appearing on the ground in the morning dew. And it's the bread, and Moses writes, "This is the bread that the Lord has given us to eat." And it's shewbread, and the definition of shewbread is the bread of the presence, referencing the presence of God. And this bread is the same bread that Christ broke at the Last Supper. When He took the bread, He gave it to His disciples, He thanked God, and He broke the bread and taught His disciples how to access God's presence and communicate and commune with the Holy Communion Prayer Bread Sacrament, the shewbread. And prayer is actually communication with God through the mushroom. And that's what Christ was teaching the people at the Last Supper. And believe it or not, the wine at the Last Supper was not alcohol, it was plant concoctions of, it wasn't fermented. God didn't send His Son to teach us how to drink alcohol that's toxic poison and leads to all destruction. And so there's alcohol Christianity, and there's the truth, which is psilocybin mushrooms are small and round, appearing on the ground in the morning dew. And in Ezekiel chapter 4, it talks about the shewbread to be prepared in cow dung, because cows are herbivores and eat grass, and there's nutrients in the grass. They don't have any stomach acid, and they got multiple stomachs. And so when they eat the mushroom spores in the pastures, it passes through them, and it ends up in their manure. And there's nothing else small and round appearing on the ground in cow manure through the process of elimination. And it talks about it being visionary. So there's something visionary, small and round, appearing on the ground when the morning dew lifts in high humidity. You got evaporation, which triggers mushrooms to pin. And I've been studying this for 10 years and emailing back and forth. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Paul Ruck. He's a professor at Boston University, and he went to Yale and Harvard and graduated from Harvard with a PhD, and he studies sacred plants and fungi and ancient religious texts. And also, he's a linguist, so he studies language. And, it's of his opinion as well that the psilocybin mushrooms are the manna, the bread from heaven, described in great detail. It's also his opinion that the holy anointing oil is cannabis infused, and it absolutely is. Not to go off on a tear about that, but it really is. The Jewish holy anointing oil is cannabis infused olive oil with cinnamon myrmecoxazole. And the cinnamon agitates the skin, opens up the pore, and allows for greater penetration. They were administering cannabis through the skin, and it absorbs into the skin and into the blood for healing and spiritual effects.
I understand where you're coming from. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, at this point, I want to give Representative Shipley, this is your bill. Do you have anything you want to add before we turn it over to the three of us here?
I think that this is a great discussion.
Well, I think turn your mic on so folks online can hear you.
again, I just want to thank everyone coming out for a great discussion. I think that we've had some powerful testimony that there is indeed medical value to these substances. The reason why the bill was for straight decriminalization or just deleting it entirely is there is a culture of what they would call microdosing, and a microdose is essentially defined from not having any sort of psychoactive property whatsoever. So there is an increasing growing number of people who do view this as an over-the-counter supplement. And anyway, so just a lot of additional thoughts there, and just looking forward to see what you guys have to say.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming this morning, thank you for your testimony. At this point, President Fry, do you have anything you want to add, and I'll turn it over to you, Wes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to the subcommittee this morning. I know it was an early morning, so I appreciate your attendance as we start our day. As I have been very consistent over my time here, I tend to look to the FDA for approval and recognition for when substances are medically available to us. In other words, when they have the opportunity to assist us medicinally. I too have concern around the notion of the word accept and want to make sure that before we would move any drugs one way or the other from the list, that we would have clearly an understanding and research that these are for medicinal purposes, and that we have mechanisms in place to deal with any addictions that might come forth. As you look at any of these on this list, on the front or the back of this, all of them addictive in some form, in some way. I've certainly heard testimony this morning around anxiety, depression, end of life, PTSD, OCD, and don't discount any of that, and would be very open to more understanding and literature review around those issues. I would challenge, though, the group as we spend time in end of life. That's one of the areas in which I've spent a lot of my career in, and we do have numerous medications to assist at the end of life to keep people comfortable. So I would have to certainly see more research around this particular drug used for end-of-life purposes in comparison to other end-of-life drugs that we currently use. So inconsistent in where I've been in the past, I'm not willing to sign on to this bill yet until I see greater evidence from federal levels of its use, and to make sure that we clearly have mechanisms in place for any addictions that could develop out of this. Those are my comments at the moment.
Thank you, Representative Fry. Representative Breckenridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, thank everybody for coming this morning and talking about this topic and bringing it to the forefront. I would echo some of the comments by Representative Fry when it comes to that FDA approval, to make sure we know what the impacts will be and make sure that that approval's there and there is medicinal acceptance and what it's going to do before we just take it out in the Schedule 1. So with that, I thank you all for coming, and I hope we hear back on the trials and see where they're at, what the federal government does, so that we can move forward as a nation, not just a state, and see what we can do.
I would as well echo the comments of my fellow legislators here, but I do think it was important for us to have this subcommittee to hear what's going on, because we have to be responsive to our constituents. We need to be watching and aware. And this is one of those, I got a lot of emails from some very well-educated people that have really got me thinking a lot more about this. But I would echo what Representative Fry said with the FDA, and then I look to the medical community for their expertise to make sure we're doing the right thing for our constituents and the citizens of the state of Iowa. So I think it's important we have this conversation, continue the conversation, continue to share your stories so that other legislators are aware of what's going on, because there may be a day we have to act on something, but I don't think today's that day. So thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate your time. Apologize I had to be so early, but again, I thought it was important that we at least have a hearing on this legislation. Thank you very much.